through the nexus of faith and the demands of leadership. We're committed to providing programming that helps all of us think through ethical leadership, purpose, mission, vision, values, diversity, spirituality, etc., all in the context of a pluralistic organizational and social environment. So our speakers today are two of my favorite Davids, David Ober and David Wolf. I have known both of them for about 6 years now. I met them when they came into Eastern University as doctoral students in organizational leadership. And so I was actively involved in their academic journey and stood proudly behind them, hooding them and welcoming them into academia as newly minted PhDs, and welcoming them into the discipline of leadership. They have in turn been tremendously helpful to me as I thought through my company and my work as a leadership coach and consultant. So we kind of peer mentors in that sense. I've watched both of them weather many storms in the 6 years that I've known them and continue to offer leadership in spite of their personal circumstances and sometimes in the midst of major organizational turmoil and many other things like that, which is why knowing their stories made me want them to come and engage with us on the question of leadership, spirituality, and resiliency. So Dr. David Wolf will be our first speaker. He will be coming to us through technology. He has his PhD in organizational leadership with a focus on business strategy from Eastern University. And he was actually the very first student that we graduated from that program, even though he was in the second cohort. So he is a type A, or whatever comes beyond type A. His educational journey included Cabrini College and Villanova University, both of them Catholic institutions that in the Philadelphia area. And he's been an entrepreneur for most of his professional life. Before being an entrepreneur, I believe he was an accountant. Mostly within the long-term healthcare industry, although I think at some point he owned a restaurant. So that's part of his pedigree. And Dr. David Ober will follow up. He also has his PhD in organizational leadership with a focus on business strategy from Eastern University. And his journey included a few breaks because of health. So it took him a year longer than he had planned, and it took me a year longer, stayed in Eastern a year longer to make sure he got done. His prior education was from Wheaton College for both undergrad and graduate studies. And he's also an entrepreneur and an international leader in the retail industry. He runs global outlet management, and they're both fathers. David Wolf may or may not tell you, but he will be a grandfather soon as well. He'll make a very young grandfather, I think. So welcome the two Davids to help us think through resiliency, spirituality, and leadership.
Thank you very much. Can you hear? Everybody can hear me correctly?
Yes.
I hope you can hear me. Okay.
I guess we need to change the...
We have to take the PowerPoint down. You want him up, David up? Yeah, okay. Right.
Okay. Now, there we go. Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for the opportunity of being here to speak with you today. I am truly sorry that I was not able to be there in person. I fully expected to be there. But I had a total knee replacement several weeks ago, and unfortunately I've had some complications as a result, and my physician would not allow me to fly for at least 30 days with concerns about blood clots and things like that. So we had to do the next best thing. So it is still my extreme pleasure to be here. I am very, very fond of Dr. Faith and her teachings, and I would do almost anything she asked of me, including coming out and visiting with you. I thought it was very interesting that she brought me the title of Leadership, Spirituality, and Resiliency in Turbulent Times. We all go through issues related to turbulent times, but I was on the phone a little bit earlier with Dr. Ober, who's standing before you, or seated before you, and we were talking about the issue of resiliency and what is it. And everybody, I assume, has their own definition. So I went online to dictionary.com and I pulled up a definition that says it is the power or ability to return to the original form, position, etc. after being bent, compressed, or stretched. The ability to be elastic. And then the second definition says the ability to recover readily from illness, depression, adversity, or the like. Buoyancy. Well, I have my own definition of resiliency. To me, a resilient person is someone that is able to deal with turbulent times in whatever context comes along and come out of those times necessarily as a better person. And whether they are better because they have a new skill set, or they are better because they have a newfound belief, or they are better because they have met someone new that has an influence on their life. Resiliency is the ability to go through any type of change, whether it is positive or negative, and come out better on the other side of that change. My background has been, as Dr. Faith said, in long-term care. I have owned nursing homes, hospitals, assisted living facilities, home care agencies, and outpatient rehabilitation facilities most of my career. And in that job, it was certainly necessary to deal with turbulent times and to be resilient. And let me give you a brief example. Because our industry, unlike almost every other industry in the United States, does not count on a market economy. In most industries, whoever provides the best product at the best price, offering the greatest value, usually wins the day. In our industry, that is not the case, because our revenue, the vast majority of our revenue, comes from Medicare and Medicaid, which are federal and state-run agencies. So it doesn't matter how good our facility is, our daily rate is based on our cost, not our quality. Because of that, we operate in a very different environment. So when I bought my nursing home, my first nursing home in 1990, our home had 100% private paid patients. It was just outside Atlantic City, New Jersey. And we started having competition, new homes coming into the area that were better than ours because they were newer. They smelled fresh, brand new construction, new beds, private rooms, etc. And my building was built in 1961. One day, the president of the local hospital, the CEO, called me up. And he said, "Dave, I have some bad news for you. We have decided we are building our own 120-bed nursing home, and we're going to fill it with our own discharges. And that means don't expect any patient referrals for quite a while." I did not know what to do. You talk about turbulent times. I went home to my wife and I said, this thing may be over before it begins. This was like the second month that I owned the facility. And I was truly in a valley. I was a single owner, so I had no partners to go to. I had no one to ask for advice other than friends, and most of my friends didn't understand the long-term care industry. and I didn't know where to turn. So after a little bit of praying and turning to God, I decided I needed to turn to the people that I was working with. So I decided to call a department head meeting of my 18 department heads. Head of housekeeping, head of maintenance, head of laundry, head of social services, head of dietary, all the department heads. And I decided that transparency and authenticity would be the best way for me to go. So I put myself before them, almost in tears, and I said, here's what's happening. Our company could be going bankrupt because we're not going to see any admissions from our primary referral hospital because they're building their own nursing home. And I'm not sure what we can do about it. So as we sat around the table thinking, I will never forget this, Josephine Cirinone, who was my director of marketing, looked up and said, have we ever considered a specialized don't have? And of course I said, what do you mean? And she said, what about offering patients that are chronic, that have ALS, that are on a ventilator? What if we opened up a ventilator-dependent unit for chronic long-term patients that are literally sitting in a hospital for the rest of their lives? So we looked into it, and we found out that we could get a license to do it, and we decided to do it. And we built a 16-bed ventilator-dependent unit that ended up winning a national award from the American Healthcare Association Quality of Life Award in 1992. And we created a positive human experience for patients that were literally warehoused in hospitals previously. We created a home-like environment. We would take them out on trips to a baseball game or to the beach, whatever they wanted to do. We increased our outcomes, we increased our revenue, and we started to stave off what the hospital would do by not referring regular geriatric long-term care admissions. That is dealing with turbulent times, and that resiliency taught me a lesson. The lesson was, no man is truly an island, and we have to look to each other to get out of turbulent times. And that's how we were able to do that. Once that unit was up and running and won the award, the first thing I said to the staff was, what's next? What else can we do? And the next thing I know, we had a 40-bed subacute rehab unit. Now today, most people are very familiar with this. If any of you have had a loved one that has gone into a nursing home and they need rehabilitation and can't go directly home to go to outpatient care, they need some type of inpatient rehab, most nursing homes today offer that level of care. We were the first nursing home in the state of New Jersey to offer subacute rehab. And we put our local rehab hospital out of business because we were able to do it more cost effectively and with much more of a home-like touch while we were giving the patient the same or better outcomes, which is they got their rehab and they were able to go home. So during those difficult times, and they were truly trying times, I will be quite transparent with you and tell you that there was more than one time when I could not meet my $250,000 biweekly payroll. And I had to take a line of credit on my home and tap that line of credit in order to meet payroll to pay my staff. That happened more than once. And coming out of that made me stronger. To me, that's what resiliency is about. When I sold the nursing home and all of the entities together in the year 2000, I had an opportunity to get into, as Faith mentioned, the restaurant business. And the reason I decided to do that was because, number one, the opportunity was there with somebody that I knew and trusted. But more than that, I wanted to test my leadership skills to see if they would transfer over different industries. And as I learned, they did. I started with a single restaurant in Exton, Pennsylvania. We ended up growing to 3 restaurants over 5 years. And at the 5th year, the general manager, the regional manager that was running the restaurants for me, came to me and asked if he could buy the company. And I told him, Absolutely. My youngest son was graduating from high school rather, heading off to college at the University of Pittsburgh. My other two children were already in college, one at Drexel University and one at Westchester University. So I saw the opportunity to move down to Florida, so I sold him the restaurant business. And I decided to go into management consulting. And I decided that I really prefer the long-term care industry to the restaurant industry because for me, long-term care has a purpose and a meaning that fills my heart. In the restaurant business, yes, it was a lot of fun to own a sports restaurant in Philadelphia. When the Philadelphia Eagles or the Flyers or the Sixers or the Phillies were in the playoffs, my restaurant was full, we were making lots of money, and that was wonderful, but my heart was not full. That's why I was so quick to sell the restaurants. I had the opportunity to get back into long-term care and to go back to school. And I saw the opportunity of becoming a management consultant, which would allow me the time to go back to school. And I got my master's degree in organizational leadership, and I loved it so much, and I enjoyed going to school so much, I decided to continue. But the question was where to go. And the opportunity again came up where I met with, of all people, my rabbi, and my rabbi, who went to the Jewish Theological Seminary, also had a PhD in comparative world religions, because he believed that as a minority people, the Jewish people needed to work harder to understand Christianity and the other religions of the world if we are all to get along and have world peace someday. So he pushed me into the organizational leadership PhD program at Eastern University, a Christian school. So there I was the first day, the only Jewish person in the entire class of Christians. And I am ready to start class, and before we begin our first dinner the first night, there is a prayer. And I'm listening to the prayer talk about Jesus and in Jesus' name, and I look and said to myself, what have I gotten myself into here? And before we started class the next day, we started with a prayer from the Bible. A Bible that I was asked to purchase, and a Bible that is based on the teachings of the New Testament. A Bible that I have never read, that I now have to read in this PhD program. Again, the resiliency, without a doubt, made me a more well-rounded, better person. I have made some unbelievable life friends. Sitting in front of you, Dr. Ober, he and I are extremely close as a result of that program. We talk to each other several times a week, even though he lives in the Philadelphia, Harrisburg area, and I live in Florida. We see each other as much as we can. We present at conferences together. We just presented in San Antonio, Texas, at the Association of Leadership Educators Conference together. And we rely on each other, not just for business advice, because he doesn't necessarily know long-term care, and I certainly don't know the outlet business, but we tell each other everything, and we are sounding boards for each other in times of turbulence and hard times. When we really can't go to anyone else, we can go to each other, and I can say to him, here's what's happening in my life. What do you think? Which way should I turn? And he helps guide me through my heart, through my soul, and through my mind. It's been a wonderful experience. I will never forget the very beginning, my first residency at Eastern University. There was a woman in our class who was sitting in the class around the table. The table was in a giant U shape. And she was sitting there sobbing. It turned out it was because she was having terrible personal problems at home with her husband. But the next thing I know, Dr. Ober, who I was not friends with at the moment because it was brand new, gets up and he walks over and gets behind her and he puts his hands on her shoulders. And he asks everyone in the room to please come over. And they all decided to go over and lay hands on this poor woman in her time of grief and strife and personal turbulence. And they all said a prayer for her. I sat there paralyzed. I've never seen anything like that. An outpouring of human emotion to help a classmate who we barely knew. It was an extremely moving moment for me, and it is something I will remember the rest of my life. And it shows the caring and compassion that these people have for each other. And I think it's wonderful. So after I graduated from school, I had the opportunity to come back, to be down in Florida, and I got a call from a gentleman that is the Senior Associate Dean of Geriatric Medicine in the College of Medicine at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton. And he said to me he was looking for a business person that also had an academic background, because he has created a program to help reduce transfers between hospitals and nursing homes, hospitals and assisted living facilities, hospitals and home care agencies. He has created a program to help those organizations reduce all of the transfers of these people. And those transfers, many of them, are unnecessary and preventable, and they cause negative outcomes to the patient. So he said to me, I know of about 6 PhDs in the United States that also are long-term care licensed administrators. I want to know if you're interested in talking. So of course I met with him, and I learned about his program called Interact, and it stands for Interventions to Reduce Acute Care Transfers. And he said to me, I want to offer you the best of both worlds. I want you to accept an academic professional position as an affiliate assistant professor in the College of Medicine, but I also want you to be the CEO of a new company we're starting called Interact Training, Education, and Management, TEAM, Team Strategies. And the purpose of that company is to train, educate, and offer management consulting services to long-term care organizations that want to implement this Interact program. I saw it as an absolute illumination of the path from God. I was able to use both my academic background and my practitioner background, because my goal from the time I entered the PhD program was to close the gap, this giant chasm between the academic world and the practitioner world. As someone that has spent 25 years inside a nursing home running it, I can tell you I had never, ever heard of the American Geriatric Society, or the Journal from the American Geriatric Society, or the Geriatric Society of America, or their journal. And yet there are prominent geriatricians and researchers all across the country publishing articles about long-term care and being in a nursing home, and yet the people running the nursing home have no idea these articles exist. I wanted to close that chasm. The way I do it is when I teach, and currently I teach 3 classes. I'm teaching leadership fundamentals, I'm teaching economics of healthcare policy, and I teach introduction to long-term care administration. And when I teach, I make sure I bring in the practitioner world into the academic world. I do it through lecture, I do it through case studies, and I do it through exercises, so my students will understand that the academic and practitioner worlds can both exist, but they need to know what each other is doing. So that is basically my story, and that's what I do full-time right now. I enjoy it very much, traveling around the country, helping organizations implement this program, but I also still very much enjoy my teaching, and I hope that God has put me on the path that He wants me to travel. Thank you.
I think at this point, hey David, I think at this point you're going to go off the screen a little bit because I have to put the PowerPoint up. Is that
That's
right?
fine.
Where is it? And this is where I don't know where to go. Beginning. All right. there's something here. Share this. Am I to share this with Jabber Video? Yes. Okay. My daughters would think this is really funny. I have a daughter that's a sophomore, and the one that's usually always disappointed with me in technology is my senior in high school, who thinks it's really weird that her dad knows more about purses and shoes than she does. When I go to Milan and have the meetings with the different retail presidents discussing what's the latest and greatest for Prada and Gucci, my daughter thinks it's really weird because she doesn't believe I'm very fashion forward. She thinks it's funny that the only time I bring out wear my Prada shoes, I actually have Prada shoes, is when I go to Italy. I would never wear that stuff here. I'm a retailer in many ways. I am the president of the trade organization that represents all outlet retailers and manufacturers worldwide. From Polo Ralph Lauren to Gucci to Prada to Corning to, well, even Coleman. And I've been involved in this business ever since I got out of my master's program. And I remember walking around with CEOs just taking notes. And now my friends who were also taking notes when we first got out of our graduate programs are now presidents of Jockey and all the different companies. In the same time, things change, right, ladies? Like some of you really like Coach a little while ago, and then this thing happened called Michael Kors, and you're not buying Coach purses anymore, you're buying Michael Kors. Because life changes, right? Now Coach is old. And it's wild. My daughters would tell you that they have the only father around that buys them purses on a regular basis. And they like the purses that I buy for them. But it's always great to have the latest buyer recommend what I should buy for them. I don't tell them that. I try to act like I know a little bit more than I really do. We're talking about resiliency. You could say retail in and of itself is resilient. We're constantly changing based on the desires of somebody that lives in Milan, or what we think your teenage daughter wants to wear next month. We're able now to manufacture clothing and change designs every 30 days and bring product to market that quickly. We're moving factories out of China as quick as we can over to Cambodia, into Vietnam, Indonesia, and soon we'll be moving almost 80% of retail production will happen somewhere in the main continent of Africa. We're always lowering price. Just realize this, if you're an older guy like myself and that brand called Van Heusen that's been around since whenever, a Van Heusen shirt in reality that would have cost you $32 back in 1983 still costs about $32. See, the American consumer likes everything to be inexpensive and the price never goes up. That's why when it comes to luxury goods, we don't rank up there very high in the country. Out of the world, luxury good consumption in the U.S., we're only like 9th for total sales. Japan's number 1, China's about to get ahead of them, Korea, Singapore are way ahead of us, and they have so much less people than we do. We'd rather buy a pair of shoes and throw them away than, remember, there's no cobblers anymore. You guys have a cobbler? Maybe Fargo has a cobbler, but it's a rarity. No one gets their soles redone, but that's part of the process. So let me ask you this question, because this is my question in resiliency with retail, is what is your brand? Not the brand of your company, but what is your personal brand? Authentic leadership talks all about the time about who are you? Are you being deliberate about what you're about? In the outlet retail business, we're pretty detailed. We've got all of our logos, we know what we stand for, and we believe people know what we're about. And if you don't know what we're about, we will show it to you in some sort of media. We're very aggressive. In outlet retail, we're building these gorgeous buildings and giving amazing experiences. And our buildings don't look like little strip centers anymore. They look like you're in Florence or Venice. And you might be in San Marcos, Texas, and you think you're in Florence because that's how we've built these things to look like. And all the great brands. And we understand the value proposition. that you want to have the opportunity to have that same goods, but you want 30% off. And if you don't get that, at least that 30% off, you're not going to shop with us. Since 2007, since the recession started and we faced the greatest turbulent times, the outlet retail groups are the only aspect of retail that was positive. We experienced double-digit growth since 2007. Only this year will be the first year that we're only having about a 7.5% growth in the outlet industry because consumers have left. I made a comment earlier, and I think I might have offended some people, that I was only talking about my research, that my dissertation research is crap, that's the word I used, in relationship to what I do every day, the research. Because each week I am running national research, asking questions of nationwide of all Americans I can't even want to tell you how much money I spend on this research, asking the question, in the last 7 days, have you shopped at an outlet center? In the last 7 days, have you shopped at a regional mall? Last 7 days, have you shopped at a big box? And we know that every single week, women are shopping less at regional malls, and they shop each week more at an outlet center. And that's the reason why we know so much incredible detail about you, because you tell us this. And we're tracking you in amazing ways. We track you in your credit cards. We track you on everything that you do. I was just recently in meetings with Amazon and Google. We know where you're moving. We mark you now. We know where you are on a daily basis off of your phone within 3 feet. When you go through some of my shopping centers, I know exactly how much time you have spent in the toilet, how much time you have spent in my food court, all the way across. Because, hey, we're paying the money to AT&T and get all these numbers. We're marking you. We have little radars, or well, not radars, but little antennas on all of our properties that are pulling up. As soon as you uniquely come onto my property, I know where you are. So I can adjust. Oh, they're not going up that street as much as they should. Let's change that. So we're responding constantly to change. And the only way to do it is to know where you are. That's why. We're already there, folks. You know, we're already have the electronic pricing. So when you come in, we know we're going to change. It changes almost automatically now. It'll be at the point we know that you can only afford $19.99 for that pair of jeans. So the only price I'm going to offer you is $19.99. But I know that somewhere else you already paid $29.99, and I'm going to offer you that's the only price because you won't buy it if it's $19.99 because it's too cheap for you. Think about it. We have companies that are going out of business because they thought the $19.99 proposition is what you needed. It wasn't. Stephen Barry's was one of the greatest and hottest retailers, had some of the greatest product in line, and completely failed because they thought you were buying their product because it was $19.99, not because it was quality product. And it actually was quality product. I mean, they got the stars from Sex and the City to support stuff. They got Marbury to support shoes. It was successful. They didn't even realize it because they were so caught in the inability to believe it was anything more than just price. So I'll keep going on this. We know things have changed. And I don't know. I have not shopped up this way. I know they tried forever to have an outlet center in South Dakota. Never worked. We don't have enough base population, all kinds of other reasons. But things are changing. And we know it's a value proposition that you're looking for. And here's the deal. And it's kind of, I wish Steve was here, but in fact, our outlet center that we're building in Springfield, Illinois, Shields is there already open. They can't wait till the outlet center opens. But right now, across the board, if you don't have an outlet aspect of your retail business, you are in major trouble because it's a new distribution channel and a very important one. 50% of all NOI of Polo Ralph Lauren is coming from their outlet division. Almost 85% of all NOI coming out of Coach is from their outlet divisions. We're very profitable because we cut out the middleman. You're not giving a piece of this to the department store. You're not giving a piece of this to Steve Shields either. To be honest with you, Nike would rather sell their own product than sell it through Steve. Steve sells a lot of their Nike. And if he was here, I'd say the same thing because I've said this to him. You see the product? The real reality is if you can control your product in a changing world, isn't it a little bit safer for these retailers? I have a mother who just ran for political office. She will be 83 when she's out of office, and she loves wearing Casper suits. And part of her deal wearing Casper suits is that she likes to walk into a Casper outlet store, and there's 3,000 square feet of that suit. So she knows she can get a lot of colors in her size. But if she goes to the department store, there might be one or two. A lot of the reason why people shop in an outlet center has nothing to do with price. It's about selection. That's part of that value proposition. Responding to change. I only show this picture because I think this is, my grandmother was one of the first, was in the outlet business. She sewed soles on the bottom of shoes. That was her job. She was a single mom, raised my dad. And to be honest with you, my first shopping experience in outlets, would you go down, they would throw the seconds down the staircase, and for $1 you could buy a pair of shoes. But now you had to match the same style and try to find a left and a right in the same size. If you could find all that, it was a lot of fun. Early yard sailing, I guess. For $1 you got a pair of shoes. But that's what it was like. Carter's, every single manufacturing plant across the United States, at one time they had like 45 of them here, all had an outlet concept. But people fail. Why? Because life changes. When's the last time you had a formal meal at your house, ladies? That's why there's no longer Royal Dalton, Waterford Wedgwood. They've all disappeared. Oneida, Reed and Barton. People don't buy sterling silver anymore. It's, those things just don't happen. False craft, all of them have disappeared as manufacturers. But some have changed. J. Crew, wow, do about $900 per square foot, and it's a hot brand. And it's not bad when the First Lady thinks J. Crew is great stuff, and other people follow. And things change. Gymboree, any of you have grandchildren? I am a contributor to the Beige Book. The Beige Book is put together 8 times a year for the Federal Reserve governors when they make the decisions about interest rate. Talk about they're trying to always adjust to change. The biggest, most important thing that's happened is since 9/11, only 1/4 has children clothing purchases dropped. They were up every single year since 9/11. Women and grandmothers would buy clothes for their children and their grandchildren, and they would stop buying clothes for themselves. It took a lot of retailers a long time to recognize what women are willing to sacrifice for their children and grandchildren, because they want their kids to go to school and look just like nothing changed. Maybe you're one of those groups. Under Armour, wow, powerful. I remember a couple years ago going out to Nike and talking to them about this little company called Under Armour. Scott and Kevin Plank were friends, and they said, oh, they're just a flea. I don't think they think they're a flea anymore. But in the outlet industry, that's where they showed their growth. Responding to change, constantly responding. You just can't mimic them. Nike tried to mimic Under Armour. They thought they'd wipe them out of business, and it didn't work. Coach, they're pretty much stable. They're going to figure themselves out. They'll come out with some new colors, and they'll go after a younger group of women, and eventually, like my daughter doesn't like to have a Coach purse since her mom has a bunch of them. So that'll change. But Michael Kors, doing almost $4,000 per square foot in a store. That's giant money, folks, per square foot. Hot, really hot. Their only problem right now is that because more and more people, too many people are buying them almost. They're scared too that they might become like Coach. Hopefully they respond to what they're learning that's happening to Coach. That consumers are fickle in the fashion business. Just quickly, just because I thought I'd put this in because you're as close as I come regularly to Canada, is biggest change in retail in Canada is we've added so much outlet. Think about that, all that square footage just a year ago, less than 1 million square feet. Now it's over 2 million square feet, and it's going to go quicker in Canada. Here are some of the ones that opened, show you. I spent a lot of time overseas. I spoke recently over in China at the first outlet convention in China. China has supposedly 53 outlet centers, but only 3 of them look like an outlet center. And they have some real problems happening. But across the world, they don't build original malls in Europe, they build outlet centers. Russia, Eastern Europe, and now all over Asia. Singapore, Indonesia, outlet centers are happening, and they all look like US outlet centers. In fact, if they go at one and it doesn't look like a US outlet center, they don't shop. And the reason for it is, we talk about how big the Chinese economic market is, it isn't that strong. And this is the reason. 51% of all luxury brands that are purchased by Chinese are purchased outside of the country. 51% are purchased outside of the country. So that's the elite. They're the folks that are members of the Chinese Communist Party. That's the only way you get out of that place. Remember that. That's the only folks that are coming out. You got to be a good member of the party. And they're the ones with the money. And they're the oligarchy. But here are the 41 new projects in Asia will be opened by 2015, 29 in Europe by 2015, additional ones. The Chinese, they want to make everything big. They think it has to be bigger because it's Chinese. I argue with them all the time. But the global experience is still price selection, overall experience. But this is the problem that's happening in China. And this is why they're failing. This is actually a real shot of a Chinese outlet center that I took. Is that they're spending all this money building them, and only 10% of the consumers are repeat customers. They're not going back. They're disappointed because they go there and there's so many knockoffs that they don't want to go back because they're not getting the experience that they experienced when they went to Japan, China, Vegas. You know, they have that experience and they're not experiencing it, and that's the outlet experience. That's what they want. And they're not going back if it doesn't feel like a real outlet experience. And that's what the research is finding. So brands, we look at the whole country, we're developing everywhere. And I even laugh now because we're building stuff in Brazil, Argentina. Argentina's a little tough. With 25% inflation rate, it's tough to figure out how do you price things. The only thing that's worth anything there is the land. But I'll move through this. Where we're headed. Here's a big change, is that people, 5 years ago, 65% of people shopped at regional malls, and now that number's already down to 45%. And it's just falling apart. And that's why Simon, the largest owner of regional malls in the United States, they never talk about their regional malls anymore. They only talk about their outlet holdings. Listen to one of their monthly or quarterly stock calls. That's the response. And I'm going to push through here. Just quick numbers. Our occupancy at a regional mall, at an outlet center is 98% basically. At a regional mall, it's 92%. And the average sales per square foot is over $100 more in an outlet center than a regional mall. Yeah. This is what you get when you have the president of a trade organization come talk to you. Metrics. We know all the metrics. We know what they do. We know what you need to have to minimally have it. But we hear about resilience. So I've done my career piece. Here's the resilience piece. What happens when life does not go as planned? What happens when it doesn't go as planned? And sometimes it's not necessarily because you have a competitor that comes in, just life happens. I had an outlet center down in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and all of a sudden I get the phone call that it burnt down. 150,000 square feet burnt down, basically half of it. And it just turned out it was 2007, 2008, and the insurance company that insured that whole section was one of the companies in New York that we thought was the #1 insurance company in the world, and they declared bankruptcy, and they defaulted on paying us. Therefore, we couldn't rebuild. And it's tough to cover a mortgage when only half of your mall is standing. Okay? I didn't do anything. It wasn't like I yelled at my wife that day. It wasn't like my kids loved me less. Life happens, right? Doesn't go as planned. What do? What have you guys done? I've listened to Steve talk about his changes. And this is the key thing, is that I look at resiliency, is that it starts, part of that whole resiliency is that struggle. And really, pain reveals the heart of a man. It's only under that pressure do we see that core. And I'm not trying, it sounds like I'm gender biased by using the word man, but person just didn't feel as good for me in this use. And failure is really, you see the core foundation. In my view of resiliency, your ability to be resilient in difficult times is all based on how you're developed and your core principles of what your foundation is built on. That simple story about the house built on the rocks or the house built on the sand is really true. What is that core? I have a daughter that's severely visually impaired, and she recently dislocated. She was out swimming outside of Virginia Beach and was out in the water and too deep, and a wave hit her and dislocated her shoulder. But she's her team's leading middle hitter, blocker on the volleyball team. What do we do, right? What do we do? What was interesting, I called my friends at Penn State. I'm the presenting sponsor of the men's and women's volleyball teams at Penn State. Just a little bias there. They've won 5 of the last 7 national championships. In Pennsylvania, it's not California. But a side note there was I talked to the top folks at Penn State Medical School and the folks in their athletic department, and they said, you need to focus on her core. And I think, it's a shoulder. No, we need to start with her pelvis. She's got to rotate her pelvis forward, It'll strengthen her diaphragm, and that will take pressure off of her shoulder. So even our bodies recognize the fact that we have to build our core for these outside limbs to work better. It was powerful insight, but very much what it means to be resilient. How you heal, how you struggle is how is your core? What are your core principles? What are your core competencies? Have you established them? It's really tough as a business when things are falling apart, where all of a sudden you recognize you don't have the core competencies to even compete. Hopefully you've done that in advance, and you've had your strategic planning for the dark times. I've been through 2 fires now. Each fire, it doesn't matter how much I plan for a fire. When buildings burn down, they're gone. And it takes time. But where's your core on this? I admit I'm a Wheaton College grad, and I went to graduate school there, and even worse, I wrestled. And Jim Elliott was a wrestler. And he wrote that no fool is a man who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Jim Elliott later put that on the line and was martyred by the Auca Indians down in Ecuador. But he really believed that. He put everything on the line. He was a wild guy at the same note. But we have to make decisions early. He, at age 19, decided already what was important. And it wasn't gold. It was his relationship with his Father, his God. And how do you develop that? Because I believe your job in and of itself is not sacred. Now, this is where people of other faiths might disagree with me. I don't think that's what's sacred. I think what's sacred is you, part of God's creation. God created you in his image. You are sacred. What you do and how you act and live your life, that's what's sacred. And that's what's wonderful. And having those relationships and those, in fact, what changes it, it doesn't matter how often or how many of these outlet centers I own or what deals I cut. I much would rather have a better relationship with my wife and my daughters and see those around me in a better light. Romans 12. I have a wife. I shared this last night with whatever it was, like 120 students. When I finally left working for other people and went on my own as an entrepreneur, cashed in and went up and started buying my own outlet centers, my first new deal was with Liz Claiborne, 10,000 square foot store. We had the big grand opening. Everything was wonderful, except my wife was late for the ribbon cutting. And she promised me she was going to take pictures. And she comes driving in really fast. And I go over, and quickly I know there's something wrong because she's not dressed up. She looks like she's crying. And my first response was, did one of her parents die? That's how she looked. And she said, David, I got 2 parts of bad news. One, the biopsy came back, and I have active cancer. 2, they scheduled the surgery immediately this afternoon, and I got to go. And I made one of the best decisions of my life at that point, and I turned around to my executive assistant and said, I got to leave now. I gave my big scissors. I had one of these really big scissors, handed that off to somebody else, and didn't come back for like 3 weeks to the office. Because at that moment, the most important thing actually was my mind was going crazy because my daughters at that time were only 5 and 7. What was I going to tell them? And the story gets worse because I'm told at one point she only has like 6 months to live. And my wife's like frightened just like I am. I don't know how to raise these kids. Crazy times. My wife and I just celebrated our 21st wedding anniversary. So she's still with us. She still fights this battle. She has a tumor right now wrapped around her vocal cords that she has refused to have removed because she thinks young girls, young ladies, need to hear the voice of their mother. So until she feels comfortable that they're on the right track, she won't even take the chance, because it's a 50-50 chance she'll lose her voice forever. And she doesn't want to be in that position. The determinations of what resilience is in examples too. I hopefully show resilience to my kids by how I handle these difficult times, and the same for yourself. But she wrote this, stenciled this in our kitchen wall about this time: rejoice in hope, persevere tribulation, and be dedicated to prayer. This one verse, Romans 12:12, is really, I believe, the life of a person of faith and resilience, because all 3 of these happen at the same time. Rejoicing is not an emotion, it's a choice. You choose to rejoice and rejoice in hope that things will get better. To persevere tribulation, it's not an easy word. It's not persevere just, you lost a job. It's tribulation. Tribulation is a tough word. And at the same time, being dedicated to prayer. Admitting that you can't handle it all by yourself. You need a greater power. And that completeness, you might say, is the three legs of a chair, of a stool. They together have to be balanced and consistent, I believe, for a person of faith to be resilient. Resiliency, like I said before, requires a solid foundation. And it can't be a foundation that you only go to see if it's in repair when you're in the middle of the trouble. My mom doesn't take care of her house well enough. And it was funny because we were walking out there, and my brother-in-law, who's 6'9", 300 and some pounds, he kind of went through the deck. That foundation wasn't in really good shape. Wasn't ready for him. The point that I say on that is you need to touch that sooner. And I believe you have to touch that on a daily basis. I think you have to have devotions. You have to be committed to prayer and to pray for others, not just yourself. This is the part that I had to teach in long talks with my daughters, is that just because you're resilient, just because you survive, doesn't mean that agony or pain goes away. Jesus Christ never promised us a pain-free life. Life isn't a whole lot of fun. David will tell you. When you have to take drugs to get rid of the pain, you're numb. There's a numbness there. God never called us to be numb. He said to experience life in its completeness. And part of that's pain. And part of that's agony. And it's not denying it. It's not easy. But hope encourages. When you can provide hope to a student, a friend, a loved one, you encourage them. And sometimes it's not even saying a word. But I do believe it's greater than just telling somebody that you will pray for them. If you say you're going to pray for them, I challenge you not to do that, but at that moment, ask if you could pray for them right now. Because saying you're going to pray for them, anybody can say that. It's the actual act of praying that separates and shows that you believe in something greater than yourself. And as I say, prayer connects. But this is what I want to close with. Forgiveness changes the playing field. Asking for forgiveness and giving forgiveness, forgiving others, changes the whole playing field. Difficult times, you can completely blow it. But forgiveness can change it, and restoration. And that's the hope. I believe that's the hope we find through Christ in my life. But forgiveness is the beginning of it, however you do it. Or else you will carry that awful burden of bitterness too long that ruins and destroys too many things and corrupts too many foundations. And with that, David, are you on? Switch you over.
I am.
This mic's work. Would you like?
We have about 9 minutes to engage with them.
Right up front.
I'm coming.
Hi, Davis. Mr. Wolf, this question is for you. I'm Emmanuel, first and foremost, by way of introduction. I'm one of those new residents of the Fargo-Moorhead area. We're from the same area, from the Philadelphia area. I was essentially working with the Catholic Archdiocesan office in Pennsylvania before I relocated because of family, and I fell in love with this beautiful community. one thing is the spiritual part. The both of you have uniquely just kind of like hit it on the nail when you said it is at the core of everything we do. And please forgive me that I'm debunking David Wolf's theory that no man's an island, because I'm pretty much sitting here like I'm on an island. It was not premeditated. I just thought to be, since I came in late, I thought to be somewhere where I wouldn't be pushing people to move here and there. But the whole thing is about stressing the aspect of forgiveness, because I struggle with that. When you come from difficult backgrounds, where some of us I come from, and you have either wronged someone or someone has wronged you, how do you engage that person in a way that you don't feel demeaned by being the first to say, I'm sorry for everything, let's forget the past and start a new leaf? Because it's at the foundation of all that we call forgiveness. And how do you come out of it stronger, tying it to resiliency? Thank you.
Just so you know, I'm texting him what your question, in case he doesn't see it.
So, if I understand you correctly, you're talking about dealing with someone that has wronged you, and how do you come out of that situation stronger and have them come out stronger as well, even though they have wronged you. Is that a good summary? Yeah. Okay.
You got it, Dave.
So let me share a very quick story with you that happened in my nursing home. I had an employee that was working for me in the maintenance department. He was approximately 19 to 20 years old, and he came to me and he said, I love my job working here, but I would like to learn a trade that I could use in the nursing home. I want to become an electrician, but I cannot afford to go to school. Is there any way the nursing home can help me pay to go to school to become an electrician? So I said, I'll tell you what, Michael, here's what we're going to do. I will pay for your tuition, but it's going to be a loan against time that you work for me. For every year of tuition that I paid for, you owe me a year at the nursing home as a loyal employee. So once you get your skills as an electrician, if it takes you 2 years to get that degree, then I expect you to stay 2 years with me and work as an electrician. And he completely agreed, because he said he was going to retire at my nursing home because he loved working there. He loved his boss, the head of maintenance, he loved his colleagues, and he loved working with patients. So we put him through school, and at the end of 2 years, he graduated, and my wife and I attended the graduation. And I was so proud that I was able to help him make this mark in his life and get this degree in electronics, to be an electrician. The week after he got the degree, he quit. And he said he was offered a job at another facility for a lot more money because he was already a licensed electrician now. And I said, well, what about our agreement? He said, I have to do what's best for my family. And he turned around and he walked away. So I spent about $20,000 in tuition, and I never felt more wronged in my life. And I let him walk away until about 2 weeks later, and I felt compelled to reach out to him. And I sent him a letter, and I said, Michael, I'm sure you're embarrassed over this situation, but the promise that you made to me, I took you at your word, that you were going to stay with me. I didn't want the money back. I just wanted you as an electrician to keep working here. And now because someone offers you some more money, you're leaving. I hope that you're able to reflect on that and really believe that you made the right decision for you and your family, because I believe in my heart that you did not. He wrote me back a letter a couple weeks later saying he was troubled over the fact that he took the job, but there were outside influences, meaning bills to pay, that were pressuring him to take that job. And he was so very sorry for what happened, and he would be more than willing to try and make up a payment plan to repay me, but it would certainly take a very long time. And I told him, don't worry about the money. I want you to understand how I felt about you, and what's more important to me is how I came out of it, in that I was not bitter, and I did not turn my back on other students, other people that came to me, an LPN that wanted to go back to school to become an RN. I didn't turn my back on her. I paid for her school, and she ended up becoming an RN and staying with me for 25 years, throughout the entire time I had facility. So to me, that's how you come out of turbulent times with resiliency and rejoice in something good that happens.
Other questions? Dave?
Well, if there are no more questions, all I can say is thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you especially for working with us in shifting to a different time slot. And thank you to my favorite Davids for hanging with us as we struggled with technology and for flying all the way out here. With that, we shall see you next month at our next luncheon. Thank you so much.
Right.
Great.
I'd love to come and visit sometime. And
Great.
out in your neck of the woods,
Thank you.
which I do a little